Okay, so, given the fact we won't be likely seeing an end of this film franchise anytime soon, I'm guessing most of you watching this has already formed a set of opinions on said previous Transformers movies, whether good, bad, and whatever the consensus happens to be on the last night. That said, I want to take this opportunity to talk about something I've been wanting to do for some time now, and as the title of this video says, to explain what exactly got me into seeing Age of Extinction. The answer to this is actually for two reasons, which I'll explain later on. Unless you just want to skip ahead already, then feel free to, timecodes at the bottom. Though I advise you to keep watching this part so you know where I'm coming from when talking about the three previous Bayformers. The first one, at its best, is okay. I enjoy seeing it in the cinemas, though upon rewatching it at home, I can definitely see a lot of the flaws and issues that put some people off it. That said, problems aside, it wasn't much of a deal breaker for me, and I still managed to find this entertaining. It's not too long before the robots start appearing on screens. I'm probably one of the few people out there who didn't have a problem with the visual aesthetics of the Transformers, nor having the issue of telling who was who in the scene. And overall, the movie itself pretty much serves as a reintroduction to the basis of what this whole series is about. Bottom line, not a great film, but I can still watch it all the way through. But as for Revenge of the Fallen, yeah, not so much. Look, enough has been said about how much of a bad movie this is. To me, it was more of a disappointment than anything else. To which, it has a germ of an interesting idea here to bring out more of the mythology or back catalogue, depending on how you want to view this as. The problem here is that they introduce these ideas and just throw them off to the backdrop, because it doesn't quite know how it wants to tell its own story. Now there are one or two good things, however small they may be in here. Some of the transformation sequences are just as eye-popping as ever, as well as playing with the scales with some of the robot forms. And I will admit both the opening segment and forest fight are indeed a bit of needle injection of an adrenaline rush. But let's not kid ourselves, it's not worth sitting through what feels like a bad teen comedy flick at such a slug speed pacing just to get to those moments. My advice, watch it in pieces, not as a full film. Dark of the Moon I felt was better, to which this one felt like the tougher, stronger, darker movie that the second one should have been. The story threads are given much more of a focus here to what is going on and for what basic reasoning this time around, and it probably has the best prologue out of these for setting the events in motion. The action sequences are less cluttered, Leonard Nimoy is a lot of fun, and it does start to center around the Transformers this time around. Now don't get me wrong, this is not a smart movie, as it once again all amounts to a meat-headed fireworks display at the very end. But at the time, it did feel like they were using the best fireworks and going out with the biggest bang, so still stupid, but somewhat watchable. Alright, now let's get on to Age of Extinction, and my first reason for seeing it? Honestly, curiosity. At this point, it did seem that the filmmakers have used up all the most recognizable names out of the Transformers toy box, and all they were left were the more bizarre ideas to go with, which we just assumed would never make it into the live action series, but hey, there you go. Now there's nothing new in terms of the setup here, which is once again something from their history influencing our history, and it becomes a mad dash chase at the end to stop whichever MacGuffin they happen to dig up being used. But that's more for the movie's climax, while the rest of it is more about setting up the new cast members along with which events have transpired since film 3. Speaking of the cast, let's face it, the human characters have always been the weak link throughout the entirety of the series. Mainly being that most of them never come off as likable enough that you would ever feel like you want to see them again for another round. So by having this one set out as a new fresh start with new faces, it means you got the likes of Wahlberg and Tucci to enjoy and not having to feel too despair whenever the camera has to spin back onto them. As for the other side of things, when it comes to the digital characters, this is where the good stuff is at. I mean, if you're going into this solely for the Transformers themselves, there's more than enough of that aspect here for you to enjoy. The story makes them the central characters of the movie, their screen time is equal to the physical actors, all the new coming Autobots are identical both from looks and personas, Prime is given a moral dilemma to overcome, Lockdown dominates any scene whenever he's on screen, along with the whole segment taking place on the night ship, and even when the Dinobots do make that last minute cowboy charge to the rescue moment, you're somewhat thankful coming out of this that they didn't somehow mess up a concept of having robot dinosaurs in your flick. My second reason ended up becoming more of an emotional one in the end. Without drawing on the personal side of things too much, long story short, 2014 was the year that my grandmother passed away at the age of 94. And as you can imagine, that tragedy event took a huge toll on myself, my family, and to anyone who both knew her and indeed loved her. However, for all the time that she was around us, and indeed we were around her, she pretty much made it her prime objective in life was to make sure that we were happy, we were enjoying our lives, and if there were any issues, just try to find anything that would make it better. So, not long after, of June of 2014, I made it a mandate for myself to go and watch this movie that it would in any way would help me cheer me up. And it did. By God, out of all the possibilities you can imagine someone being coming out of watching a Transformers movie, this one did the trick. Now, by saying that, some of you may be thinking that might cloud my judgment of what the film actually was, and as before, I did go back and rewatch it at home, and yeah, I can't consider it a good movie in its own right, and I just could have gone off and made a video of everything that is wrong, both from objectively and moral issues, just like everybody else has done. But the thing is, I just didn't want to go off and do that. Look guys, in all seriousness, I wouldn't have gone through the effort of making this video on the sole intent to convince you that you will be able to enjoy any of these or the hypothetical 14 other movies yet to come. But instead, rather to say that for the whole 10 years worth of them, this one came out at a point when I needed something to lighten up one of the darkest moments of my life. Yes, to a lot of the people out there, and when it's all said and done, this movie, like the rest of them, is nothing more than a 2-hour-long summertime throwaway piece of trash entertainment. But for what it's worth, as an escapist fantasy having to deal with the harshness of the real world, it succeeded and then some, in my opinion. The fact being I've been able to say any of this stuff at all, I consider that to be a miracle in itself. Not only do I feel so relieved of having gotten through this whole thing, but also, I can look back and be happy that I've actually gone and done it. And in the end, to one person in particular, that's all they ever asked for.